All right, who wants to take the lead in the opening segment?
You do, Kevin.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
You do.
Me.
You do.
Aw,
That
man.
voodoo. That
Oh,
you
man.
do.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pursuing Pixels. This is episode number 55, and my name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with Randall Nolery
Hey, everybody.
and John Hines.
Hello.
And we are back, as always, to talk about some video games. I don't even know why I try. Yeah, I don't know why I try with these intros. I'm starting over again. By the way.
What? No, you're
But,
oh my God.
I gotta say something other than we're back as always to talk about some video games.
You know what? No, we're
I
keeping this and we're going. If you can't think of anything better to say, then this is the best you got.
Don't say it at all,
Kevin.
Yeah. If you got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. But I guess okay. Well, I'll find an edit point somewhere in there, and we can roll with that.
Won't.
But I'll try my best. But yeah, we're back as always to talk about some video games. And
right.
After last week, I talked about some Yoshi's Woolly World, and I guess I was kind of mixed on that game, and then I kind of tossed a little shade at Yoshi's Island. Not like hard shade or anything, but I feel like I was kind of dismissive of that game a little bit, of like its soundtrack or something. I don't know. When I was listening back at editing, I was like, I don't feel like I remember being that negative when I was talking, but I felt like I came off a little more negative. But I've actually, on the Switch Online service, I've actually been playing Yoshi's Island, and I'm through like the first world and a half.
Nice.
So I'm actually about exactly as far as I was in Yoshi's Woolly World. And I kind of have the same complaints, though, that I have about, I think they just try to pack too much into these games. You know, they just kind of, like, there's so many, again, like to get 100%, again, I'm not trying to do that. It's not even fun to try to do. Yeah, especially like the boss battles. Like some of them I might skate by and like get a few, like if you can throw some eggs real quick and knock out the boss without taking a hit and without even really moving, you might get lucky. But some of the bosses, it's like I'm ticking down. I have like 5 stars at the end of the level, or, with your health. And of course you got Baby Mario crying and screaming every time you take a hit. And that's super obnoxious. It's not any less obnoxious. I was like, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I remember. It's like as bad or worse. And you can't control the sound effects levels or anything like that. But it's super charming, but there's just a lot of that. They reuse a lot of the same songs. It's really repetitive. They're catchy tunes, but they're just kind of sparse.
Those are great songs though, man. They're pretty really good tracks.
But there's only been like 4 songs so far in the game, and like and they're really like empty sounding. They're really like,
because it's that Super Nintendo soundboard,
I guess, but like I don't know, like the Super Mario World soundtrack, just like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I like that game more, but like, I don't know, I feel like they just didn't quite know what game they wanted to make with Yoshi's Island, and in turn with a lot of the Yoshi's, or with a lot of Yoshi's games in general, because I just feel like there's super exploratory, but like, there was a couple levels where like I died a couple times and I was just like, screw it up. I don't care about the red coins. I don't care about even trying to like, find some of the hidden paths. Cause I still try to, mine the levels and search around. I'm just like not going to kick myself if I don't find every last thing.
Yeah, you can't.
But it's just gotten to the point where like after I've died a few times and I'm just like, I don't care. And I start speed running, or not speed running, but I'm not really concerning myself with hitting every little cloud box and every little, switch and trigger. It's like that's kind of fun to just kind of speed through the levels. But like, there's just, I don't know, when you're like morphing into a mole cart and then you're like turning into Baby Mario with the cape and running upside down and speeding around like Sonic. It's like, it's super cool, but it's like, I don't know. You guys have both played this game, right? Because I played through the whole thing on Game Boy Advance, but this is my first time actually playing it like in earnest on the Super Nintendo, or at least like, in its original form.
Oh, wow.
I have the original cartridge, but yeah, I never really I bought it more in my collecting phase than my actually playing games phase. So.
That makes sense. Yeah, those are 2 separate phases for the both of us. Yes.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little later, I think. But
no, I like Yoshi's Island quite a bit. I mean, but I was also the type to try to feel the pain of doing the 100% on levels, and there was one time in my life where I'm going to get 100 on every level, and that didn't last very long, but it was a thought that I had at one point. point before it became unsustainable by like the end of World 2.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Like, it's just, especially because it's just, again, like because some of those challenges are based around exploration and some of them are based around not taking any damage, or one of them is at least, and there is it's not like you can do the full health run separately and then do the 20 coin run independently. It's like, because that would actually be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm just going to burn through these. I think that would actually, for me personally, make the game a lot better.
Right.
But I shouldn't complain too much. Like, I'm coming off overly negative on these Yoshi games because they are fun. They are charming. I love the art style, the kind of crayon look to it. It's a little sharper than I remembered, actually. Yeah, I like it a lot too. I kind of remembered it looking more like Kirby's Dream Land 3, like that really soft like outline and everything, but it's really like everything's got like really bold, like almost like comic book or coloring book outlines to it. It looks like a coloring book. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it than just like crayons.
Sharp sprite pixels. I love the look of that game.
Oh yeah. And just like, the softer, like kind of pastel colors. It's great. I really have been enjoying that. And then I guess kind of to just kind of twist off of that in a way, because I'm playing this on the Switch Super Nintendo service as well. And Yoshi did get slapped onto this game in the US. But in Tetris Attack.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't just Yoshi that got slapped onto that game. So did the name Tetris for some reason.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that's why we got Panel de Pan.
Yes.
Because, of course, Nintendo has the rights for the Yoshi stuff, but I don't think they wanted to shell out for that Tetris license.
Correct.
So we got the Japanese import of Panel de Pan, but it's the same exact game. I still, I got to say I'm a little bit frustrated that I just can't believe they don't have like a translation for the menus in the games. It seems like that would be a pretty easy thing to do, or at least have like a menu like on the main like hub screen of the, like if you could they have like that extra info button? I think if you hit X when you're looking at a game, like on the Super Nintendo menu, and then it'll tell you like how many players and how many times you played it and like a little brief history of the game. Like for those Japanese games, I feel like they should put something in there that just kind of, hey, this is like versus mode. This is time attack. This is just something.
Don't have to integrate it with the actual game itself. Like just have it as like an additional screen. Yeah.
Right. Little overlay
seem
or
like
something.
That would be that hard.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, so that was like, there's only a handful of options. It was pretty straightforward. It's like, okay, I guess this is the see how long I can last mode, and this is the like battle, versus the computer. This is kind of the campaign mode. But like for the campaign mode, which is what I put the most time into, I actually got almost all the way to the end, but it is getting so freaking hard. Like within, like if I don't get like a combo match, I'm on like level 5 of 6. Like there's like, or like, I don't know, there's like 5 different like worlds that you have to, or 6 different worlds that you have to battle through, that have like 5 levels each, and it keeps just kind of speeding up. And this is like the Puzzle League series, if you're not familiar with the franchise, the blocks just kind of rise up from the bottom. Nothing like Tetris at all.
Nope.
And then you just control a cursor, and you basically, in this game at least, you can just swap them, left and right. You can't like switch the cursor vertically or anything like that.
Which that's the same as the other Puzzle League games.
Yeah, I guess the only other one I've ever played was on the DS, Planet Puzzle League, I think it was. And with the touchscreen, you could like grab them only left and right, but you could like slide them all the way across the screen in like one swoop, which was kind of cheap.
Played Pokemon Puzzle League, Kevin. Don't even act like you.
Oh yeah, I guess I just never owned it. I never owned it, so I haven't like put like the hours in.
I've made you play that game.
Yeah, you handed it to me a couple times. But yeah, it's just a super addicting. The soundtrack is the exact same soundtrack from, I do have Tetris Attack on my Super Nintendo, and it is one of the games that I've put a lot of time into, on the cartridge.
Oh yeah.
But it's the perfect game to have on your Switch. Like, I'm so happy they released this, and I know you put a tiny bit of time into this, Randall. And you've played Tetris Attack too. So
yeah,
are you as excited as I am? Because we got to go head to head.
We do. We have to go head to head so that I can beat you. Tina and I played yesterday some head to head too, and I'm like, oh, yep, here we go. This is Puzzle League. It is exactly that, and that's cool. Like, it's obviously has aesthetic differences from Tetris Attack, where you're playing as all the cute Yoshi's Island characters, or Pokemon Puzzle League, where you're playing as the trainers and their Pokemon that shout their barks over and over again. Which I gotta say, Pokemon Puzzle League is more fun for that reason. But still, like Panel de Pon has its own charms. It's mostly a collection of kind of different like fairy characters, I guess you would say. They kind of
that's what I would say.
Yeah, and then there's some other like alternate characters too. Like you could be like a dragon or something like that. But yeah, it plays just like you would expect, and it's exciting because it's on the Switch Online Super Nintendo service. So yeah, you can play online, and it is available whenever you want on your Switch. And there is no other Puzzle League that's available on a modern platform, so that's a big deal.
Oh wow, yeah.
Which is it's crazy, but it's the only one.
Yeah. But it is cool because, like the game, like we talked about, like other than the DS version having a slight different control scheme, like every game has been basically the same. Yep. So you're not really missing much. You know, the presentation's nice and clean. Yep. Again, at least you and I, Randall, we all like retro pixel art stuff. So I mean, it just looks great to me, like really vibrant colors.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just feels good. It is a little tough to set up combos in this game for me. Like I really have a hard time like getting a good string of like actual like chaining things together, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's because you can only shift blocks sideways. It's kind of hard to, I don't know, get anything going, at least for me, but I'm never that good.
Time, but it is difficult to set up on purpose. I'll give you that.
I got to kind of fall into it. It's like, I'll see like, oh, I could do that, but I kind of luck into like, it's already halfway set up for me or something.
Yeah.
So,
but I would say it's between, this Panel de Pon / Puzzle League or Puzzle Fighter as like my favorite competitive puzzle games. Like that's like, it's on that tier for me. So I was definitely psyched because I've never played the original Panel de Pon and now it's available. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it was really cool to see like all the original artwork and stuff because I'd only ever played Tetris Attack, so
right. Yeah,
and it does like for a game that doesn't feel that fast paced. Like if you were to just like watch video of it like in a not frantic mode, like you just see the blocks moving up like really slowly, like and the cursor's just like chirping along, tiles. Like it makes this little like ding ding when you move it along. Like it just seems like the most leisurely game. But yeah, like the part I'm in, like again, if I don't get a combo within like 5 seconds, it's over. I'm dead immediately. It's crazy.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm having a really good time with that. So I have played a few other things, but I've been talking too much. John, what have you been playing with your downtime this week?
So I picked this game up when it was on sale for I think 50% off, and I'd had my eye on it for years now. But I've been playing Dragon's Dogma, Dark Arisen on the Switch.
Nice. And is that a port of a previous game or is it a new game on the Switch?
It's a port of I think a PS3 game.
I think that's right. Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
It came out years ago, but like most games, like I'm playing it for the first time because now it's finally on a Nintendo system.
Yep.
But yeah, it's I had been wanting an action like open world RPG for a while. Haven't had one come across that's really like gotten its teeth in me. That's not Skyrim for like the 100th time. So I was pumped to like try something new, and I think I made the mistake like at the very beginning, being like, I'm going to be a magic class, and like right from the start, I was just getting like destroyed. And this is like before, like maybe it wasn't before, but it was before Capcom decided autosaves were a good idea.
Oh, no.
So it was just like me dying and then losing like an hour's worth of progress, which is maddening and like a really good way to like have me not want to continue playing a
Correct.
game. So it took me a while. Like I had been dipping in and out of this game for a minute now, and like I finally gotten to the point where I've like grinded enough levels or like learned enough skills where like it's actually being fun at this point.
You stuck with your magic man?
Oh, I stuck with that magic man. I got pawns to go into battle and actually do the dirty work. But yeah, I did a couple of like the main quests, and I've been moving a little bit further along, and I'm starting to get the hang of it, starting to get more powerful spells. Still haven't done a ton of like side quests and stuff, but I really like the like environment, and like I think I just realized that like your inventory like one weighs you down. A lot of stuff is not really communicated in this game. There's just a billion different mechanics, and like they kind of all just are there. And I think also there's like a time lapse on the items, because like my inventory is full of things like rotten berries.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, oh cool.
No.
Glad that like all the things that I had like picked up that I thought were useful have become garbage because I didn't use them within like a time frame.
Yeah, and I don't know if I hoard all that kind of stuff
Right,
too
of
until
course.
I'm like, oh, I got to save these for later.
Right.
Yeah,
I pick
you
up
know?
literally everything in every game. So
Of course.
I'm still like banging my head against it and trying to figure out mechanics without like, I don't know, looking anything up. Like I went into the game blind basically just off of like, oh, I know like certain people like love this game and it's supposed to be really good. And I
Right.
picked it up for 50% off. So like I'm not angry at anyone for that. So like I'm making my way through it, but it's been a trip.
Yeah.
What would you like compare? Like, it's kind of like a dungeon crawler. Like, was it meant to be co-op, or because I think I confused this game with, didn't BioWare come out with a similar
Dragon
themed game?
Age.
Dragon Age. Yeah, I
Yes.
always get those two games mixed up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's less RPG-ish then. It's more like an action game, or
Kind of, it definitely feels like a Capcom action game. Like
Uh-huh.
I definitely get the feeling of like it being like kind of more, not button mashy per se, but like definitely more action oriented and like RPG. Like there's very little, I think, customization beyond like what skills you unlock and like what attacks you are like focusing on. Like I picked my class and then like I've been leveling up and I've had no control over like what stats are increasing or like anything beyond that. So like I've just been like, well, I keep using the fire spell. I'm going to use upload that. I was like, oh, but I like the lightning spell because it automatically targets enemies. I'll upgrade that. And then,
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of where the customization has been for me. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm
Okay.
enjoying it. It's like I feel like it's halfway between, I don't know, a Dark Souls and a Bayonetta.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, that probably appeals to a lot of people. I
Yeah.
would think.
Like
At least
it's
you can
not
kind of
as
shut your brain off a little bit compared to something like a Dark Souls potentially. At least once you get to a certain
Yeah.
level, it sounds like.
Yeah, it has like the deliberate like degree of Dark Souls where like I was like, all right, I'm not just going into every like encounter like sword like flinging around. Like I still have to like make sure that there's enough distance between
okay.
me and the enemies and like figure out their attack patterns. But like it's not as involved that like I can't also just be like, I'm just gonna go in there and just keep casting fire spells until this thing dies.
Yeah, eat a bunch of these rotten berries and
Oh yeah, I
Hide in the corner
finally
and shoot
figured
fire
out
spells.
I can like regenerate my health in battle because I was like, God, I get like my healing spell like won't heal me to like full health, and I was like, oh, I have items I can use them.
Never use items. You'll need them for later.
No.
Exactly. Exactly. What about you, Randall? What have you been messing around with in the little bit of time you've had around family time?
Besides Panel de Pan, Kevin, you were threatening to play Timespinner. You didn't really follow through with that, but I took your threat seriously.
I've already played some. I've already played some weeks ago. I already forgot about that. No, I'm just kidding. But I did play some a couple weeks ago. I was actually kind of waiting for you, so I'm glad we'll probably be kind of in sync here.
Yes. So, in time around family, I was like, yeah, let me get into this Timespinner a bit. And I did. I will say I'm already stuck, which is not great. I've been stuck for like the last 45 to an hour of playing this game, which is not, yeah.
How far are you into the game? I'm probably about like 2 hours in, I would say. I have not gotten stuck yet, but I haven't really gotten that far either.
Yeah, I probably like 4 hours, I want to say.
Okay.
And there's a lot I enjoy about it. I think the soundtrack is just, like they perfectly nailed the like 90s CD type of soundtrack. It's
yeah.
it's got its own like atmosphere to it where it's like borderline corny but also really good. Like it's good. I like it quite a bit.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I really like the vibe. Like it feels like a souped up like Super Nintendo JRPG soundtrack kind of, which is kind of like, to me, I don't know, it just has like those soft like kind of strings, you know, that come in like that bump. Like I don't know, I really like how it sounds. Yeah, I love the soundtrack and the presentation in general. Like it is like a really nice looking game. It's from Chucklefish, and yeah, they usually do a nice job with their stuff.
Yeah, I think we mentioned before that it kind of has a similar look to it to Chasm as far as like how zoomed in it is with the character and things like that. Where I'm like, oh, okay, like that made it an easier transition to kind of get into this game. So
yeah.
About 4 hours in, I mean, I got stuck, but I'm still having a really good time. They're definitely going for the Symphony of the Night thing. They're not bashful about that whatsoever. To the point where it's like, there's enough of its own identity there, but they are leaning hard into it. Like even like the level up font, like that's like practically pulled out of Symphony of the Night. But it's good.
I don't have a ton of experience with Symphony of the Night. I've only played like a tiny bit way back in the day, but yeah, that didn't catch me. You know, I wasn't like, oh, this is kind of ripping off. So that's interesting.
Yeah, no, but I'm still having a good time. I'm going to see it through because like I own this game physically and everything else. If I can get past this part where I'm stuck, and I think I know what I need to do, but I don't think I can do it. So I'm trying to figure out why I'm being so stupid. But we'll find out. Maybe I just didn't have a fresh enough brain when I was playing it at that point. It's one of those things. Maybe I need a couple of days away from it to come back, and then I'll figure it out in 2 seconds. But we'll see.
So how many different weapons have you found? So like one of the main gimmicks or whatever you want to call it in this game is that you get like these different orbs that you carry. Yeah. And you hold one in each hand. And like the first ones you start out with are just kind of like these blue orbs that just have like pretty limited range. It's almost like a melee attack. And then at least for me, the second one I got was like a green like sword that I preferred over the orbs because it kind of like does like a 45 degree like arc slash, so you can kind of like hit enemies. Yeah, if there's like a bat or something like swooping down at you, you can kind of jump and swing it. And also when you use like your magic attack with that sword, you have this like just giant blade that like reaches all the way to the top of the screen. It's almost a screen clear, like not quite, but I mean it is like. Yeah, it's huge, but I really like that. But have you found more weapons beyond that or more orbs? Yep,
I've got some fire orbs. And it's kind of cool, too, where slight spoilers, I guess, but like the fire orbs weren't just another attack, but also a way to like clear some brambles that were blocking your path to go into other sections. So like there's some of that happening, too. And then there was another like skull orb or something like that I got that's just like basically like more damage.
Yeah.
And it's nice too because you get 3 different like loadout opportunities that you can flip between quickly on the shoulder buttons, where you have one that's got the blue orbs, one that's got like that green orb sword thing, and then I've got one with the skulls or whatever, just to have all of them available to me to kind of flip between for whatever reason.
And I think you can even mix and match too. Like you can have like, this is my primary orb, and then my secondary is a fire orb, you know, even though I'm using the sword in my main hand. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool too. Again, I'm not quite as far as you. Now that you mentioned the fire orbs, I think I just got those, and that's right where I stopped. Okay. I was like, I got the fire orbs, and then that's about how far I got. But I really like just the presentation. The story does seem like, you know, it's just like thought out. It's not just like, I don't know, the dialogue, like opening little cutscene. It wasn't like overly drawn out, but it like got me invested in playing the game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They kind of lean into the story a little bit. That is a differentiation compared to a lot of these games. There's a little bit more story happening here. And even more if you want like the lore of it, where you're picking up items that kind of have even more backstory that you can read if you want to, which is cool.
Yeah, but for what it's worth, I think it's a very good balance, because some of these games go a little too heavy on the like dialogue. Like I haven't played much Owlboy or what was that other game? It's like really you play that like she's got like a wrench and it's more like a puzzle. Iconoclast, yeah. Like nice. I've heard that like there's just tons and tons and tons of dialogue. Like you're just sludging through it, you know. And this, at least up to the point I've played, has not felt overly egregious.
Oh, no. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Good balance that way.
Yeah. Well, one more thing that I've been playing, and I guess it'll kind of lead into the retro conversation we're going to have at the back half of this podcast here. Actually, I didn't expect to play all the way through this. I mentioned on our anniversary episode that Glenn and I were working on a video game, our buddy Glenn and I, and I've been working on some of the music for it. And I was like, what better to get some inspiration from than Shovel Knight? So I was like, let me listen to some Shovel Knight, because like all my stuff, like I'm pretty happy with how the chip tunes are turning out, but they all are like, I don't know. I don't have that, like, I can't get that rhythmic sound. Like all my bass sounds are just kind of like, let me just ring out that note and hold it out as like if it's a chord or something, which I like, but like, Shovel Knight's got these, even like the little yacht club, ditty when you start up the game has got like, and there's like all this crazy percussion going on. It's like, whoa, man. So I put like headphones on while I was playing. I actually did a little stream of it as well. I like recorded the first chunk of playing, and I actually ended up beating the game today before. And it's,
nice.
I really liked the structure of this game. I talked to DJ a little bit about it because he was like, I feel like Specter Knight is like almost a perfect game. I personally will say I prefer King Knight like heavily over Specter Knight. It's probably actually my least favorite that I've played so far.
Specter Knight is?
Yeah,
wow.
I found it to be really finicky more than any of the other Shovel Knight games, where like, because one of your abilities is to wall run, and any time you even like clip the side of a wall that you're able to wall run on, you do like just stick to it and start running up it. And like, I just found myself like, I don't know, and it was probably the easiest of all of them as well. I haven't played Plague Knight, but I hear that that's one of the more difficult ones.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with
I
that.
just like, I only died on one boss throughout the whole game.
Jeez.
One time, like, I mean, again, I didn't go for 100% everything, but like every boss, they're just like with that little... Like, with King Knight, you have both characters kind of have like a similar like attack where you're moving, like you're charging forward. Specter Knight's more so not all of your attacks, but when you're in the air, you're kind of doing this like diagonal slash,
right?
That goes, either upwards or downwards diagonally through an enemy or through a projectile or, just through little level puzzle things.
Yeah, and it's almost like a jump kick or something that you can do like up or down. Would be a good way of like describing that.
Yeah, like in almost like Turtles in Time,
right?
Like when you're just like jumping and doing like that long kick.
Yep.
But yeah, it does feel great to like when you have like an enemy that you're like above and you can keep like downward diagonally just slamming into them. But like I found for like a lot of the bosses, I just pretty much just spammed that and just plowed through them. And the one thing I find too is I found this with King Knight as well. Like I pretty much don't use any of the magic items in these games. They made sense for me in Shovel Knight because you don't really have a ranged attack of any kind, but like, and I guess you don't really have like a ranged attack per se as King Knight, but because you can kind of you can attack from a distance, you know, you can cover ground while you're attacking. And I just find that like, I don't know, I other than like using like, you get like a health thing that, I mean, I'm chugging those potions. Don't get me wrong. I'm refilling my will all the time. But like, as far as like the boomerang or like all the different power-ups, you get too many of them. And it seems like it's just kind of like they felt like they had to put all that stuff in there.
Wow.
Because it was in Shovel Knight or something. I don't know. It just didn't feel necessary. I didn't use any of them.
I definitely used a ton of them in, I think, both Spectre and Plague Knight. Like I beat Plague Knight and I definitely used like some of the items, especially for like platforming challenges. Yeah. But no, I think I used the sub-weapons heavily, but that also might just be like Castlevania second nature for me.
Yep,
where
same.
like I needed to like vary my attacks based on the situation, like just out of habit.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting because while I was playing this, I was thinking like, and not that I'm the first person to say this by any means, we might have even said it on the podcast before, but like the Shovel Knight series really is a great mixing of Mega Man and Castlevania. Like,
oh yeah,
to me it just, even though you're not doing a ton of shooting in Shovel Knight, just the way it feels like to platform around feels a little more Mega Man-y to me, but like the combat feels very Castlevania. I don't know. I don't know. I've had some like nitpicks here and there, but I overall really love the game. I actually really loved how, I do like the overworld in the original Shovel Knight and in King Knight, but like I kind of liked how this one you just like you have your hub world and you just kind of go to this mirror and you pick what level you want to play in any order that you want, kind of more like Mega Man,
Right.
except for like the last couple levels. But yeah, I had a really good time playing this game, which is no surprise. I'm not, no news here. Shovel Knight's good. But yeah, I had a really good time playing Specter Knight. Again, just a tiny bit disappointed because it seemed like this one was like a favorite of people's, and I was just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna love this one. I've loved everything else, so this is gonna be like the best of the best. And
right.
I found it to be just like, again, maybe just going in with that expectation led me to that. But
that's fair.
That's really, I don't need to say much else about it other than, yeah, it's just awesome. It is one of the few that you can buy separately too. If you don't have the whole Shovel Knight package, a lot of times it goes on sale for like $5. So.
Yeah, for some reason, I think it's because it was like early eShop days, and I was just excited about the Switch, and like the Treasure Trove Complete wasn't out yet, and I was like, I knew I was going to buy the physical Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, so I'm like, ooh, look, it's Specter. Let me grab that while it's on a sale, just so I've got another digital game on, my Switch. So I bought that for that reason before every game imaginable came out on Switch in the subsequent years.
Well, anyways, I could pretty much wrap that up there, and I think we can just go into our kind of general retro conversation. I don't know exactly how we're going to frame this.
Yeah.
We're going to just kind of see where it goes.
That's right.
But Randall kind of suggested wanting to, having some thoughts about this retro stuff, retro in the current era, I guess. Or
yeah. So, like, this was sparked in my head from something that you mentioned, Kevin, like maybe about a month back at this point, where you're like, man, I've been living in this apartment for like 5 years and I still haven't hooked up any of my retro stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I've been here for a while too, and I still haven't hooked up most of my retro stuff. And it got me thinking, like, why is, like, obviously there's the whole barrier of like setting up stuff in general can be a pain in the ass and time consuming and makes you all sweaty and irritated. Like, I get that, but like, there's got to be more than that. Like, we love these games. We've bought a ton of these games. Like, why isn't the impetus there to do something about it? But then
at your place back in Ferndale, I mean, you had a room dedicated to like, this is not only the game room, like this is the retro game room. Like, we'll play the Wii in the other room, in the living room, but like this room is for my game collection and all my retro stuff to be actively hooked up with a proper CRT TV.
Of course.
It was like, we were hardcore, man.
in multiple of my living arrangements, I've been lucky enough to have like, a dedicated retro shrine. It was that important to me. And yet here I am now, and it's still not hooked up, after so long. And I was thinking, the heyday of that for me, and I think also for you, Kevin, was, 10 years ago or so. But 10 years ago or so, it was a completely different world as far as like the video game industry was concerned. You go back to 10 years ago, and maybe Xbox Live Arcade, was finally doing things that were more in the retro vein. But for about 10 years prior to that, the whole video game industry was like, basically, fuck these retro styled like 2D anything, for that matter, and we're just moving forward, and moving forward meant clunky 3D games of all types. And I needed to fill that somehow, and retro games at that time were extremely affordable on top of that, and it was so much fun to find these hidden games that you hadn't heard about or couldn't get access to when you were younger or couldn't buy regardless. And there was a whole fun thing along with that, because it was so cheap that you could take a risk on some weird game that you saw once or twice. And that was fun for what it was. But then I guess as years have gone on, and, all the folks that were our age then and grew up with some of this stuff and didn't see these games for so long started making those games again. And, now in modern days, post Xbox Live Arcade with, Super Meat Boy and, all the Fez and all these other games that came out at the time, to now there's just like an unlimited amount of these indie games that were obviously inspired by the retro games from the 16 and 32-bit days. And, now you probably would never be able to play all of them. So like that itch has been scratched. That's one of my theories for why that, there was not the impetus to run right back to the retro stuff as much as there was before.
I think you're right on the money, because I was thinking the exact same thing, and even, you know, obviously there's stuff like Shovel Knight that is like trying to be like pretty much, you know, as true to the retro.
Yeah.
You know, they're going a little beyond what the NES was capable of, but they're really trying to like give you that pure sense of nostalgia.
Yep.
But a lot of even that game, you know, but it has a lot of quality of life improvements.
Absolutely.
You know, but a lot of, so that's a huge thing, is like I can get these retro, the same experiences or similar experiences, but with all kinds of added features, whether it's just something as simple as like a save state on the Switch Super Nintendo service, like literally actually playing retro games. But how many times can I say literally tonight? But yeah, like actually playing retro games there, like that's an awesome feature. But yeah, to be able to do like play Gato Roboto or play Minute or play, I don't know, almost, you know, we could just go on forever. You know, there's just an endless supply of retro games that give me the same feelings I had without having to blow on my cartridges and figure out, oh, let me get the rubbing alcohol out, which you can't even buy right now.
So you're not supposed to blow on the cartridges, Kevin. You're supposed to use the rubbing alcohol. 90+%. Come on, everybody knows that.
All right. I know. But
gonna
either
add
way,
corrosion to your cartridges.
But yeah, just dealing with that is always a hassle. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you were. I feel like just the conveniences, and then all these retro collections and packages and stuff like that, you know, they just make it so easy to own these games again. It's like it's almost just not worth it unless you're actually into the collection.
Like, you know, it's not even getting the exact same thing. It's getting that ROM maybe wrapped around like all new features in, like you said, the modern conveniences of save states, or, you know, even something as far as like Wild Guns or Ninja Savior / Warriors that like made that sucker widescreen and added a couple of characters like that completely replaced that old version of that game to me in my head. I don't need to have both. Yeah.
Or even something like Sonic Mania, I'm not a huge fan of, but like, are you really going to play Sonic 2 again? Probably not. Maybe, I don't know. But what about
Sonic
you, John?
Mania is a better game. Yeah.
yeah. But I know like Randall and I have a lot of like shared collecting and stuff like that. But what about you, John? I know I don't really know much about your retro experiences.
Yeah, I think like for me personally, like I'm like just barely younger than you guys. Like there's not a generational divide between us, but like there was a console generation divide between us.
Sure.
So like I basically grew up with like a Game Boy and an N64, and like those were my like first consoles I had. So like and since that was such like a huge shift, a paradigm shift of between like 2D and 3D, that like even like at the time, like I really wasn't interested in going back and like getting a Super Nintendo. So yeah, even like in the 2010s, like it basically impossible to find like a working Super Nintendo or like anything like that. If you wanted to go back and like play like the history of the games, like what I ended up doing was like I played a lot of like classic games on emulation, like anything that wasn't re-released on the Game Boy Advance. So like a bunch of the Super Nintendo games that I got familiar with like were either ported or like re-released in some fashion. But like I remember like trying to play like Earthbound on like my parents' computer in the basement. Like same thing with like Chrono Trigger, and like not really getting the same experience because like like one, I was playing it on a computer and not like a television. And
let's say, were you using a keyboard when you were playing those?
Yeah 100%. And like especially I remember there was a part in Chrono Trigger where you had to play like you had to like press like a certain amount of keys like at the same time, but like latency on a keyboard was like so much more precise than a Super Nintendo controller, so you could never technically hit the like buttons simultaneously. So you had to map all the buttons that you needed to hit to the same keystroke.
Oh my god.
Regardless.
That's ridiculous.
But yeah, like I didn't really have a like I didn't feel the need to collect a lot of like older games because basically my collections were games that I had just amassed over the course of like a console generation. So by the time like the Wii came out, like I had all of my N64 games, and like the only way I could ever play them until like the virtual console actually started being a thing was like to hook up my N64. So like I was just hoarding these games because like there was no precedent of them ever being re-released at the time.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like my options were either emulation or like games that I already owned. And like that was pretty much how I played with them, and like kind of do now, even to that fact, like especially since like I've been I've owned every Nintendo system since the N64, and like I have like some of those games get re-released on Virtual Console, but that's completely at the whims of Nintendo.
Yep.
When they decide, it was like, yeah, I guess we can like eke out some more money from releasing Majora's Mask on Wii U. And I'll be like, yeah, I lent my expansion pack to a friend like in college. So the only way I'm going to be able to play that is if I buy it again on Wii U. But
never lend out your expansion pack. You got to leave that sucker in, put that lid back on top, man. You should know better than that.
We had to play Donkey Kong 64 though.
I don't know about that. You can probably skip right over that one.
Donkey Kong 64.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, one thing that's kind of a bummer, because I knew we were going to be having this retro conversation, and I think we mentioned on a previous episode of the podcast where there was that, or maybe we were talking off the air, but there's that SNES drunk video where he talks about like the 10 hardest, or maybe it's not a countdown, but it's like the hardest Super Nintendo games that aren't that hard.
Yep.
And I remember we were talking a little bit about Mega Man X, and he's like, oh, if you take this approach through the game, it'll be a little bit easier.
Yep.
And I have the Mega Man X Legacy Collection on Switch. The cartridge, and then which only has like the volume 1 in the cartridge, and then you get a download of volume 2,
which is a
bummer. But I started playing Mega Man X, and I owned the cartridge as well, and I've played a little bit, and it's like, I don't know, it's a pretty crummy package, man. It's like it was really like laggy, and like the input delay was like noticeable enough to where it bothered me, and then but it was even like way more slowdown than I would ever experience on the Super Nintendo, like choppiness. Like it was actually just like, especially when it's like, hey, this is supposed to be like the definitive Mega Man collection, right. You know? Mm-hmm. I was all excited that they just released that Mega Man Zero collection, or the ZX Zero collection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I was like, I had one of them on DS. I think I had like Mega Man Advent or ZX Advent.
Yep.
But I never really played it, and I was like, I was kind of pumped. I was actually thinking about checking those out, but after playing the Mega Man X collection, I don't think so. If this is the level of the package, no way.
That's too bad.
Very disappointed in that package.
Yeah. They didn't treat that with that much care as they should have.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt that way about the first one too. Like the original Mega Man Legacy package. I'm even a little more familiar with those. You know, DJ and I at one point played through all 6 of the original Mega Man games on the NES.
Nice.
And so like that one was even more noticeable to me, like the input lag. I'm just so familiar, like the controls of those Mega Man games on the NES are just baked into my brain.
Yep.
So it just felt, I don't know. Yeah, I'm actually probably going to get rid of those cartridges. I don't see myself ever playing them. So
dang.
But thankfully I do still have so as we're having this conversation, there's a reason to hold on to those retro cartridges. But like you said though, when there's something like Wild Guns,
yes,
where they just full blown. But then again, they just put Wild Guns on the Super Nintendo online service on the Switch.
They did,
which you can play that online, and I don't think Wild Guns Reloaded has online play. It's like,
believe so. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of reasons, I guess, to take many different avenues. Obviously, that's just the on the Switch service. That's just kind of included with your online subscription. So
right.
But I thought that was kind of a curious choice to pick that game when there's already a technically superior version of it. You know,
Natsume wanted that money, man. Like, here you go. And it's a great game. I mean, either way,
in either form,
you should play that game one way or the other. There's not many games like it either. So it's cool that it's widely available. Yeah,
and it's like a gallery shooter, but with a little tint of platforming in there. You know, just not platforming, but just like you're controlling a character and not just a cursor on the screen. So,
and before the Wild Guns re-releases, that cartridge was extremely expensive. So to now have that widely available in a couple different formats is super cool as far as I'm concerned. I love that they're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, especially the ones and even stuff like Streets of Rage 4, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Actually, didn't you get that cartridge, Randall? I saw you playing on the Switch, or that you booted it up.
No, in fact, so actually with that, so I have Wii U arcade sticks that I bought on clearance during the Wii U days, and they're nice. They're like the actual like tournament edition, like Mad Catz arcade sticks, but for Wii U. Which means they have things like the home button, which is still obviously a thing from Wii U to, from Wii to the Switch.
Yeah.
So, and all those things still work. Granted, you need to have this like 8-bit DOE USB adapter so that it can send out like a Bluetooth signal or whatever, but it totally works. So I do not have the cartridge yet because it's through limited run. So they like do a pre-order and then it's months and months before you get your actual cartridge. But I was not going to wait months and months. And Tina likes to play these games with arcade sticks, and we had arcade sticks, but for Switch. So I bought it again.
All right. Just total sucker, because I'm playing Timespinner on Game Pass, and I'm playing this on Game Pass, so I'm playing for free, baby.
I know, right?
Randall's just shelling out limited run.
I know.
No, but it is really cool to have. Like, I am kind of jealous of, like, again, because the art and the music and the care of the little bit I've played of Timespinner so far.
Yeah.
But even that's another example of, like, again, like these 16-bit Metroidvania style games, like
with
this
modern
is
touches. Yep.
Yeah, with a menu. Again, you can swap with the shoulder button, even just having more buttons on the controller. You know, sometimes they can go a little overboard, but I think overall, I think it's a nice thing to have. So
but that did remind me of another point of something that I do like about retro games, in that, like, while I'll still like pull out my Game Gear, which has 2 face buttons on it besides the start button, right? 2 buttons. But I will turn that sucker on and play it because there's something to be said for creativity through limitations too, right? And they were forced to only use 2 buttons or 3 buttons or 4 buttons or even 6 buttons, compared to the multitude of button options you have on all the modern controllers, where everything's pretty universal now, besides just where the joysticks are oriented. But back in the day, it wasn't that way. And, they had to make different versions or totally different games for each platform because of the limitations of, not only the system chips, but the controllers themselves. And I like to turn on something like an NES or a Game Gear that's got practically 2 buttons and play those games
Boy
with those limitations.
With the 2 face buttons and the 2 shoulder buttons.
Yeah, right? I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's still a dumb decision by Nintendo. Why wouldn't you put 4 face buttons on that thing? Come on, man.
No, you needed those.
But still, they had cool, unique games that they could make with 4 buttons, and tons of great like 16-bit experiences. Really, that's kind of almost where it started, where like there were companies making new 16-bit games because of the Game Boy Advance, and I was so psyched for that system.
Oh yeah.
It comes out and they got a new Castlevania game just like right out the gate. Like, whoa, and it was the first time in a while, right? A real 2D one.
Yeah. I've been a handheld guy for most of my life. Like, that has been my usually my favorite system of any console generation is whatever version of Game Boy or DS was out for a while. So like I did play like a ton of like re-releases through those games, but like
totally.
Yeah, like there is just like a period of time where like the only games I was playing were new ones, because like it was just either impossible to find old ones. Like I remember like when I was like still buying games for PlayStation, even though I didn't own one, because like again, everybody had one, no matter who I was living with at the time.
Definitely.
I would be able to play it. And like I was like on a whim, I was like, oh man, I'll look at, I heard Final Fantasy VII's pretty good. I'll look to see how much that costs. And then like the only copies that were available at like a disc replay were $100. And it's just like, I guess I'm never playing this game until it got released on Switch. Like, and I got to play it like decades after it came out. But
and again, with those quality of life improvements, I remember you using like the fast motion liberally, if I recall correctly. So
never turned it off.
That's a savior for something like that. It's old school JRPGs. Seriously.
They just added Final Fantasy IX to Game Pass, so I'm pretty excited to
the best
maybe
Final
check that out.
Fantasy.
Really, I've heard mostly good things from everyone that I know. So
it has the same skill acquiring system as the real best Final Fantasy Tactics Advance.
Oh, there we go.
I just say, I'm like, oh, I'm excited to check that out. I guarantee that I will not talk about Final Fantasy IX on this
100%.
podcast by the end of the year. Guaranteed. But you never know. You never know. But I don't know. Did you guys have anything more to add on to the retro stuff, or just in this conversation in general? I know we kind of didn't necessarily focus on retro per se, but just the general conversation.
I've always got more to add about retro conversations, Kevin. The one other thing that I did think that I kind of briefly touched on it, but not fully, was that the other thing that still justifies having my systems like a TurboGrafx or a Dreamcast or these kind of stranger off the cuff systems is these one-off oddity games that they were not commercial successes. A lot of these games, they were like weird ideas that someone, like a team or one person or a few people, threw at a wall to see what would happen, right? And it was before games. Now in 2020, game design is kind of more or less down to a science with a lot of these genres, but it wasn't so back, even by, turn of the century. And I just love those weird, odd games that, they've got a lot of clunkiness to them, but there's also a lot of heart and a lot of just interesting things going on. What do you guys think about that?
No, I'm in the exact same boat. And I think that is kind of the not necessarily downside of maybe the past 2 decades of games where now you can have an indie studio put out something, or even just one person put out a game, but it'll still be widespread, and it's if they're releasing it in independently, it's typically on either PC or something that like a Steam platform, which for the time being at least is widely available to everyone, and people could save down a version of it. But I remember when we were discussing this, and I think I brought up Evolution Worlds for the GameCube or originally for the Dreamcast, and that game's never going to be re-released.
No.
That game's never going to be touched again. And I sold that to a GameStop years ago, and I've regretted it because I'm never going to play that game ever again.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily the best experience, but it's something that was unique to it. People made that game and created a whole world in it, and it's just inaccessible unless I get it through emulation or something.
Right.
And that whole era of games that came out in the N64 through Wii era that weren't commercial successes, but or even the what would I forget? There's a nicer term than shovelware, but all of the games that were made for every intellectual property, oh, here's a 2D platformer with the Powerpuff Girls, this is on the Game Boy now,
yep.
And but all of those are unique experiences that
some of
a
those
team
games
of
are
people
good.
made. Right.
Yeah. But I know people hype up that Kim Possible 2 game on Game Boy Advance all the time.
But where are you going to get that? Where you can't experience that unless you got it as a gift in 2003.
Well, especially those games, because then there's a license attached to them too, so that's even more complicated to get re-released on a modern platform.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right.
There are so many time capsules that are in games that you kind of either have to be there in the moment or they're lost forever.
Time capsule's a really good way of putting that.
Yeah, because I think, you were talking about that, Randall. I'm wondering if unless you're somebody that's interested in game design itself, where you're hey, I want to look into the history of the evolution of games or whatever. If you're just kind of a casual player, you're probably not going to boot up some Sega Saturn games and be hey, I'm having a great time. You might, but
you could have a great time with Die Hard Arcade or something weird like that.
That's
a great game.
But don't you think But do you think if you never played that, because like I played Die Hard Arcade like in the arcade, and I played it obviously at your place,
Yes.
and I have some connection to it, or
Yes.
at least a connection to that era. Like I think if someone, if 10 years from now, if Fiona's playing some games and she's like, I don't know that she's going to be blown away by Die Hard Arcade.
I'm
like
going to
we
make her
are,
play
or
it though.
Taken.
It's definitely a game I'm going to play with her.
That game is amazing.
Yes.
So yeah, and there's another game that's never probably going to get ported with all the licensing stuff. So like, yeah, I mean, now that we're talking about this, I'm like missing my collecting, like, because there was like that rush of like going to a store.
Oh yeah.
And I can't remember, again, I can never remember what we talk about on the podcast and like off the air before and after, but
Right.
like I just know like going to all those stores and driving around the state, and
I love that,
just
man.
It's just getting that find and getting that game that like, I kind of remember hearing about this on Racket Boy. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think I remember this game being good. I think it was on their like, hardcore 101 list or whatever it was. Like that was such a resource, and like, or even, when they first started bringing like the import stuff on the virtual console on the Wii, like Do Re Mi Fantasy
deal.
and stuff. Like that was, so
Sin
now that
and
they're doing stuff
Punishment.
like that on the Switch, that was, man, we could go on forever.
Yes.
and even that, Sin and Punishment, that spawned, like they actually made a sequel here in America that came, that was released everywhere. So, for the Wii. So, I mean, there's a lot of good that can come from these retro revivals, that sometimes they can kind of seem like a little bit of a cash grab.
Yeah.
And maybe in the case of the Mega Man Legacy Collection, maybe it is. But but yeah, I don't know. I'm for the most part, I'm just happy about the state of games as they are, because you could pretty much get any kind of fix that you want, whether you like the retro stuff, whether you like the modern stuff, whether you want a little mix of everything. You can get all of it. So
definitely, it's a much more
there's
bountiful world that way as far as video games and your options are concerned.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's hardly anything to complain about. But but I think we can pretty much wrap it up there this week, guys. We've been talking long enough, yeah?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, as always, you can find us on the internet. We're at pursuingpixels.com. You can follow us or join our Discord server. And then we've also got, we're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Where else are we, guys? Is that pretty much everything?
Those are the places we like the most.
Yeah, that'll link you
We're on
to any of them.
Yeah, we're on Facebook, but it's just streaming it from what we post on Instagram. So we're not checking Facebook, guys. So don't leave us any messages there.
Right.
But thanks for tuning in as always. We'll catch you next week, and take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're losing your edge.
Losing my mind.
Once tell me I'm fine. Nothing's alright. I can't.
All I can picture is just like the camera for the music video, like just shaking right in his face.
This way.
I actually really liked that song for a second.
I still really like that song.
We were all 12
Come
years
at
old
me.
once.
Hell yeah.